Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. The most dangerous thing you can ever do is stop caring about how people feel when you finally tell the truth about love. Think about it. Love is the one subject that can start wars, build kingdoms, or make a fully grown adult cry into their phone at 3 a.m. while scrolling their ex's Instagram. And here's a fact for you. Psychologists found that heartbreak activates the same part of the brain as physical pain, which basically means when you stop romanticizing the nonsense and call love what it really is, people don't just get offended. They feel it in their bones like a fracture. And let's be honest, you, the chosen one, were never meant to sit quietly and nod along with fairy tales. Your Idgaf switch has flipped, and that's when things get messy. Because the moment you stop speaking in Hallmark card language and start speaking in truth, people don't just get uncomfortable, they get exposed. Their whole definition of love begins to look like a badly written script. And your opinion? Oh, it's about to sound like heresy to those still living in delusion. But here's the twist. You're not being heartless. You're being clear. And clarity feels violent to people who've survived off confusion. That's why your perspective ruffles feathers. Not because it's wrong, but because it makes people question if they ever truly loved, or if they were just addicted to being adored. So buckle up. This isn't going to be the soft candlelit talk about soulmates and butterflies. This is the crash course in why your detachment is the scariest love story ever told. Because you're about to rewrite what love actually means, and trust me, not everyone is going to clap for you. Number 1. Love exposes who's addicted to control. Love exposes who's addicted to control. That's the brutal truth that most people don't want to hear. When you stop bending, when you stop giving endless chances, when you stop cushioning someone's ego with soft excuses, the love itself doesn't vanish, their sense of control does. And suddenly, you see them panic. Because what they called love was never about cherishing you, it was about having power over you. Control hides well in relationships. It shows up as the little sigh when you voice an opinion they don't like. It shows up in the guilt trips, the silence treatments, the way they make you question if you're too much or not enough. It feels subtle at first, but it's really a leash. And as long as you kept shrinking, apologizing, and walking on eggshells, the leash stayed invisible. They could call it love. They could dress it up as care. They could even convince you it was just how relationships work. But the moment you cut that leash, that's when their true face shows. People addicted to control don't want partnership. They want ownership. They don't want love as a union. They want love as a weapon. And when the weapon stops working, they feel exposed. Suddenly they're not the ones steering the ship. Suddenly they realize the affection wasn't theirs to command. It was yours to give freely. And nothing terrifies a controller more than realizing they don't actually own the source of what they've been feeding off. That's why detachment hurts them more than rejection. If you screamed, begged, or fought, they'd still feel tethered to you. But when you say, "I don't need this," and actually mean it, the panic sets in. Because now they have no buttons left to push, no hooks left in you. And that's when you understand. The whole time they didn't fear losing you. They feared losing the version of you they could manipulate. Love, in its purest form, has no obsession with control. It gives, it receives, it grows. But counterfeit love, the kind you escape from, survives only through power games. And once you withdraw from that game, you don't just walk away from a person. You shatter the entire system they built their ego on. That collapse? That's not the end of love. That's the end of their illusion. And for someone addicted to control, there's no greater humiliation than realizing love never obeyed them in the first place. Number 2, people don't love you. They love how powerless you felt around them. People don't love you. They love how powerless you felt around them. That's the kind of truth that doesn't sound nice, but it cuts to the core of why so many relationships fall apart the second you reclaim yourself. As long as you were unsure of your worth, as long as you doubted yourself and leaned on them for validation, they had something to feed on. They mistook your vulnerability for love and their control for importance. It wasn't about cherishing who you are. It was about thriving off who you weren't yet. The reality is, when you didn't fully know your strength, you gave people the perfect role to play. Savior, guide, protector, even judge. They could feel big while you felt small. That imbalance wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. They told themselves, this person needs me. This person can't move without me. And because you hadn't stepped into your full power yet, it looked true. But the moment you grew, the moment you stood firm and no longer needed their approval to breathe, the whole dynamic flipped. That's when the mask slips, because now, the same people who said they loved you don't recognize you anymore. They say you've changed, that you're distant, cold, arrogant even. But what they're really saying is, you're not easy to control anymore. What they miss isn't you. It's the version of you that lived in their shadow, the version that kept them comfortable. And here's the sting. Many people confuse dependency with intimacy. They think your constant need for them was love, when in reality it was survival. Now that you no longer need them to survive, the connection feels empty on their end, because their worth was never in giving, only in being depended on. That's not love, that's ego disguised as care. This is why your growth threatens people. Not because you became unlovable, but because you became untouchable. The powerless version of you gave them importance. The powerful version of you exposes the hollowness of their role. And once they realize the love they claimed was tied to your weakness, the truth burns. They never really loved you. They loved the control they had over the unfinished you. That's the difference between love and possession. Love celebrates your becoming. Possession mourns it. And when you rise into who you truly are, you don't just outgrow people. You outgrow the lies they told themselves about what love really was. Number 3, love isn't fragile. Egos are. Love isn't fragile. Egos are. That's a truth most people don't want to admit, because it shatters the dramatic story they've built around heartbreak. Love itself is one of the strongest forces we'll ever experience. It can endure distance, survive loss, even stretch across years without fading. What doesn't survive, however, is the ego wrapped around it. And that's where people confuse things. They think the love ended, but really, it was their ego that couldn't handle not being fed anymore. Egos are obsessed with ownership. They want to say, this person is mine. This love is proof I'm valuable. This connection makes me superior. When the bond changes, when you stop catering, when you stop shrinking, when you stop performing the role that flatters them, they don't mourn the love itself. They mourn the image of themselves that your presence once validated. The loss isn't in the feeling, it's in the identity they built around that feeling. That's why so many people confuse rejection with betrayal. It's not that their heart can't handle love being gone, it's that their ego can't handle no longer being chosen. Because being chosen for them wasn't about mutual growth or shared joy. It was about what it said about them. And when that's taken away, they don't grieve the bond. They grieve the blow to their pride. Love doesn't break. What breaks are illusions, fantasies, and the self-importance people attach to being loved. When someone leaves, the ego translates it as, I wasn't enough. But the love itself didn't evaporate. It simply outgrew the space the ego demanded it stay confined in. True love can bend, stretch, evolve. Ego refuses to let it move. Ego needs it frozen in a form that always feels flattering, always feels safe. And when love dares to change shape, the ego calls it betrayal. This is why many people will say love hurt them, when in reality love revealed them. It revealed their need to control, their addiction to validation, their fragile sense of self. Love didn't do the damage, ego did. The love was real, but the person's ability to carry it was limited by how much their pride could handle. So when a relationship collapses, the real tragedy isn't that love failed. The tragedy is that ego stood in the way of it surviving. Love isn't the fragile thing here. Ego is. And that's why the ones who truly love are rare. Because they're the ones willing to let go of pride just to let love keep breathing. Number 4. Most people don't want love. They want worship. Most people don't want love. They want worship. That's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath so many so-called relationships. Love in its purest form is about connection, honesty, and mutual growth. But worship is about hierarchy. It's about one person placing themselves above the other, feeding on endless validation, demanding praise disguised as affection. And that's why so many people say they're searching for love. But what they're really chasing is someone willing to play audience to their performance. They don't crave a partner. They crave a mirror. A mirror that doesn't reflect reality, but one that bends itself into flattery, that erases flaws, that keeps them convinced they're whole even when they're hollow. True love requires you to face yourself. Worship allows you to avoid yourself, and that's why many choose the illusion over the real thing. Love challenges you, worship excuses you, love grows you, worship inflates you. The danger is that when you step into your power, when you stop bowing down and start standing tall, the illusion collapses. Suddenly they say you've changed. Suddenly you're too much, too difficult, or not who you used to be. But what really happened is that the mirror cracked. You stopped reflecting back the version of them they wanted to believe in, and for people addicted to worship, that's intolerable. This is why some relationships never survive the shift from fantasy to reality. As long as you're pouring into them, showering them with attention, making them feel like the center of the universe, they call it love. But the moment you need to be seen too, the moment you demand reciprocity, they call it a problem, because they never wanted equality, they wanted a throne. And here's the cruel irony. The people who demand the most worship are usually the ones who feel the emptiest inside. They aren't looking for love to share, they're looking for love to cover the void, and no matter how much you give, it will never be enough, because worship doesn't heal, it only numbs. Love is about connection, but worship is about control. And when you refuse to play the worshiper anymore, when you step out of the role they scripted for you, you don't just lose a relationship, you expose the fact that what they called love was never love at all. It was idolatry, and you were never meant to be anyone's altar. Number 5, love isn't about compatibility. It's about capacity. Love isn't about compatibility. It's about capacity. People love to talk about finding the right fit, like relationships are some puzzle where all you need is matching edges and similar hobbies. But the truth is, you can find someone who matches your interests, shares your background, laughs at the same jokes, even feels like a perfect fit on paper, and still end up shattered. Why? Because compatibility doesn't mean anything if one person doesn't have the capacity to love. Capacity is about emotional depth. It's about resilience, honesty, accountability, and the ability to give and receive without collapsing under the weight of it. Two people can fit perfectly in personality and lifestyle, but if one person is emotionally bankrupt, it's like building a dream home on a cracked foundation. It might look solid from the outside, but it won't survive the storm. And storms always come. A lot of relationships fail not because the people weren't compatible, but because someone didn't have the emotional bandwidth to sustain love. They didn't have the capacity to sit in hard conversations without running, to give without keeping score, to hold space for someone else's growth without feeling threatened. And so, despite all the surface-level alignment, the relationship collapses. It's not that the match was wrong. It's that the container was too small. This is why you can feel so confused after a breakup. You'll say, "But we were so compatible, we clicked, we understood each other." And yes, you did. But understanding someone and being able to carry love with them are two different things. Compatibility is chemistry. Capacity is endurance. Compatibility makes you start the race. Capacity determines if you finish it. The hardest part is accepting that some people don't lack compatibility with you. They lack the inner capacity to love anyone fully. They can offer attraction, fun, excitement, even a sense of destiny. But when it comes to the weight of real love, forgiveness, patience, vulnerability, sacrifice, they fold. Not because they didn't want you, but because they didn't have the emotional muscles to hold you. That's the painful truth. Love is less about finding the right one, and more about finding someone with the capacity to build with you. Compatibility might spark the fire, but capacity is what keeps it alive. Without it, even the most perfect fit turns into rubble. Number 6. Indifference hurts more than hate. Indifference hurts more than hate, and that's what makes it the sharpest cut of all. Hate, as ugly as it is, still acknowledges you. It still means you matter enough to stir up emotion, to take up space in someone's chest, even if that space is filled with bitterness. Hate is still a form of connection. It says you exist and I can't ignore it. But indifference, that's the death blow. Indifference says, you're not even part of my world anymore. You hold no weight here. That's why people often cling to conflict after a breakup or a fallout. Arguments, drama, subtweets, late-night calls filled with venom. It all feels destructive, but in a twisted way, it's reassuring. Because at least it means the other person is still invested. The fire is still burning, even if it's burning the house down. But when the fire goes out, when there's no spark of anger, no attempt to fight, no effort to prove or defend, that's when reality sinks in. Indifference is final. It's silence where there used to be noise. It's absence where there used to be presence. The reason indifference stings so deeply is because it removes you from the story. Hatred still casts you as a character. Maybe the villain, maybe the betrayer, but at least you're written into the script. Indifference erases your name from the page altogether. There's no role left to play, no dialogue left to give. You're no longer part of their narrative. And that kind of erasure feels colder than any insult could. And here's the real kicker. Indifference often arrives when one person has truly healed. When you've reached the point where you don't replay the memories, you don't rehearse the arguments, you don't even feel the urge to prove a point. That's when you've stepped out of their world entirely. You no longer need closure, because you are closure. This is why indifference is feared more than hate. Hate can be fought, argued with, even twisted back into love in some cases. But indifference is unmovable. It's the full stop at the end of a chapter. And once you get there, you're no longer tied to their chaos, their validation, or their presence. You've cut the last thread. In the end, indifference is the truest freedom. It hurts, yes, but only because it's the undeniable proof that someone doesn't just dislike you. They've outgrown the very need to react to you, and there's nothing more final than that. Number 7. Love isn't sacrifice, it's currency. Love isn't sacrifice, it's currency. That line alone flips everything people are taught about relationships. Because so many are conditioned to believe that love is measured by how much you can give up, how much you can endure, how much you can lose for the sake of another. But real love doesn't bankrupt you. Real love circulates. It's an exchange, a flow, a balance where giving and receiving fuel each other. The moment it turns into one-sided spending, it's no longer love. It's debt dressed up as devotion. Debt happens when one person is always pouring and the other is always consuming. At first you don't notice it because love makes giving feel natural. But over time, the imbalance becomes obvious. You start feeling drained instead of alive. You begin to realize that your acts of sacrifice aren't being matched with replenishment. They're being treated as entitlement. And no matter how much you give, the hunger never stops. That's not love. That's extraction. The danger with this debt-driven version of love is that it convinces you suffering is proof of loyalty. It whispers, if you really love them, you'll endure. If you really love them, you'll keep pouring. And before you know it, you're measuring the health of your relationship not by the joy it brings, but by the amount of pain you can withstand. That isn't noble, that's exploitation. Love as currency doesn't mean keeping score. It means both people understand that energy, time, trust, and care are valuable, and they're willing to exchange them freely. When the flow is balanced, both people feel richer, fuller, stronger. You give because you want to, not because you're being drained. You receive because your partner wants to, not because you're demanding. The current moves both ways, and that's what keeps the connection alive. The hardest realization comes when you see that your sacrifices haven't built love. They've only built resentment. You thought you were proving your heart, but what you really proved was your willingness to self-destruct for someone else's comfort. And no matter how much you pour into that kind of dynamic, the debt only grows. Love doesn't ask you to go broke, it asks you to invest. And in a true partnership, every investment multiplies, not just in one person's account, but in both. If what you're building feels more like debt than wealth, then you're not in love. You're in chains. And real love was never meant to feel like bondage. Number 8, people don't miss you. They miss the access. People don't miss you. They miss the access. That's a truth many avoid because it's painful to accept that what looked like deep longing was often just nostalgia for convenience. When someone loses you, the flood of calls, the late-night messages, the dramatic tears, the sudden confessions of "I still love you," they rarely spring from rediscovered appreciation for your essence. More often, they're about missing the privileges they once enjoyed in your presence. Think about what access really means. It's not just your body or your time, it's your energy, your attention, your emotional labor, your listening ear, your ability to make them feel important. Access is the comfort of knowing they could reach into your world whenever they needed, and you would answer. Access is the security of knowing they could drain from your well without worrying about how much water was left for you. When that access is cut off, it isn't your soul they mourn. It's the loss of their entitlement to your resources. This is why breakups often confuse people. They hear the desperate apologies and assume it's proof of love. But if it were truly about love, the regret would focus on who you are, not what you provided. Love says, "I miss your presence, your laughter, your mind, your being." Entitlement says, "I miss how easy it was to get what I needed from you." Those two sound similar when spoken in desperation, but the difference becomes clear in the actions that follow. If someone truly misses you, they'll respect your boundaries. They'll reflect on their failures. They'll grow without demanding your return. But if what they miss is access, they'll rush, they'll beg, they'll manipulate. They'll use guilt. Anything to pry open the door you finally closed. It's not love, it's withdrawal. They're addicted to what you gave, and now they're experiencing the crash. The painful clarity comes when you realize you were never fully seen. You were only consumed. They didn't marvel at your essence, they used it. And now, without your presence, they're not longing for who you are. They're longing for the privileges you no longer hand out. When you understand this, you stop confusing desperation for devotion. You stop letting "I miss you" be enough to undo your growth. Because real love misses you. Everything else just misses the access. And you were never meant to live your life as someone else's open door. Number 9. Love is the fastest lie detector. Love is the fastest lie detector. It doesn't just reveal truth, it exposes it in ways nothing else can. People can pretend for months, even years, wearing carefully built masks of patience, kindness, and devotion. But love has a way of pressing the cracks in a person's character until the disguise shatters. And when it does, you see the difference between someone who actually loved you and someone who only loved the performance of you. That's the bitter medicine many choke on. Some people never fell for you. They fell for the version of you that made them comfortable. The agreeable version, the compliant version, the endlessly giving version. They applauded the performance, not the person. And the second you step out of that role, the applause stops. Suddenly, the affection dries up. Suddenly, the patience evaporates. Suddenly, the love collapses. Not because you changed, but because you stopped performing. Love is supposed to be about seeing someone fully, beyond appearances, beyond roles, beyond convenience. But counterfeit love thrives only on illusion. It depends on you staying in character, delivering the lines they want to hear, never deviating from the script. The lie is that they loved you. The truth is that they loved the mask. And when you took it off, they didn't just lose interest. They revealed that interest was never in you to begin with. This is why real love feels rare. Because real love doesn't just survive the mask falling, it begins when the mask falls. Real love isn't impressed by your performance. It wants the raw, unedited you. It can handle your flaws, your silence, your sharp edges, your growth. It doesn't require you to shrink or disguise yourself to keep it alive. But false love crumbles the second reality steps in. Because it was never love, it was fantasy. So when relationships collapse under the weight of truth, don't mistake it for love failing. What failed was the lie. Love didn't betray you. It revealed the betrayal that was already there. And in that revelation, you gain the sharpest clarity. Some people were never holding your heart. They were only holding the mask. And once the performance ends, so does their illusion. Number 10. Love is not blind. It's selectively sighted. Love is not blind, it's selectively sighted. The idea that people fall blindly into relationships is one of the biggest myths we keep telling ourselves to soften the truth. Most of the time, we do see the red flags. We notice the sharp tone, the selfish patterns, the lack of effort, the lies that don't quite line up. But instead of calling them what they are, we paint over them with colors that make the story feel prettier. We don't miss the signs. We reinterpret them into something we can tolerate. This is where the danger lies. Love, in its rawest form, makes us want to believe the best. It tilts our perception, not by removing our vision, but by convincing us to filter it. That inconsistency we spotted becomes, they're just stressed. That disrespect we felt becomes, they didn't mean it like that. That emotional unavailability becomes, they're just guarded because of past pain. We don't fail to see, we choose not to accept. Because accepting would force us to admit the fairy tale is cracking. The truth is, romanticizing red flags into roses is less about them and more about us. It's about our fear of loss, our hunger for love, our desperation to make something work, even when it clearly isn't. We edit reality to protect the fantasy. We convince ourselves that love requires endurance at all costs, when what it actually requires is discernment. But here's the cruel aftermath. Every red flag we ignore grows sharper with time. What was once a whisper becomes a scream, and eventually the same traits we once romanticized as passion or uniqueness reveal themselves as the very reasons we're broken. The rose petals fall off, and all that's left is the thorn we kept pretending wasn't there. Love isn't blind because blindness implies innocence. It's not innocence. It's willful sight. We see the truth, but love tempts us to dress it up in softer colors. That's why heartbreak often carries shame with it. Deep down we knew, we saw. We just chose the rose-colored version of the story, hoping reality would bend to our dreams. The liberation comes when you accept that love doesn't require blindness at all. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to see people as they are, not as we want them to be. Because love that survives truth is stronger than any fantasy, and anything built on selective sight is doomed to collapse under the weight of what we refuse to admit. Number 11. People don't break your heart. They reveal it was never safe with them. People don't break your heart. They reveal it was never safe with them. That's the part most people don't want to face, because it shifts the story from, they ruined me, to, I trusted the wrong place with my most fragile thing. Heartbreak feels like destruction, like someone took something whole and shattered it into pieces. But the deeper truth is that your heart wasn't destroyed, it was exposed. What got destroyed was the illusion that it was ever protected in their hands. When you love someone, you place your heart in their care. You let them see the vulnerable sides of you, the fears, the hopes, the softness you don't show the world. You hand over the keys, believing they'll guard it with the same care you would. But not everyone is capable of that kind of stewardship. Some people don't even know how to handle their own hearts, let alone someone else's. So instead of nurturing what you gave, they mishandle it, neglect it, or worse, exploit it. And when the pain comes, it's easy to say, they broke me. But the truth is, the fracture was always waiting. The moment you gave something sacred to someone careless, it was never safe. This doesn't mean you were foolish for loving. It means you were human. It means you believed. But the lesson inside heartbreak is not that love itself is dangerous, but that love requires discernment. The person who hurt you didn't destroy love. They showed you what happens when love is entrusted to someone who can't carry it. And that's not your destruction, that's their limitation. Heartbreak in this sense is less about endings and more about revelations. It reveals what you ignored, what you hoped would change, what you pretended not to see. It unmasks the truth that care and commitment were never mutual, that your openness wasn't met with protection, that what you thought was a sanctuary was in reality a trap. So no, people don't break your heart. They just fail to keep it safe. And as painful as that is, it leaves you with something invaluable: clarity. The clarity to see who can truly hold your love without dropping it. The clarity to realize that your heart's worth is not diminished by their failure, because your heart was never broken. It was simply misplaced. And now you know better where it belongs. Number 12. Your detachment is their nightmare. Your detachment is their nightmare. The shift happens quietly at first. The texts you don't rush to answer, the calls you let ring out, the conversations where you no longer argue or explain yourself. To them it feels like you're pulling away. But in truth, you're not pulling away. You're standing up straight. And that terrifies them, because the bond they thought was unbreakable was never love to begin with. It was leverage. And the second you stop needing them, the leash they had around your neck turns to dust. People who thrive on control mistake dependence for devotion. As long as you needed them, their approval, their presence, their resources, their affection, they felt safe. Not safe in the sense of love, but safe in their power over you. They told themselves, this person won't leave, this person won't survive without me. Your need was their comfort blanket. Your dependence was their security system. And when you detach, they lose both at once. That's when the panic sets in. They'll try to bait you back into old cycles, picking fights, guilt-tripping, promising change, even pretending to be the person you always hoped they'd become. But all of it is performance, born out of fear, not fear of losing you, but fear of losing their grip on you. Because your detachment means they're finally forced to face themselves without your energy to feed on. And for someone addicted to control, that kind of mirror is unbearable. The irony is, they often confuse your detachment with coldness, but it's not coldness at all. It's clarity. You no longer bleed for what drains you. You no longer argue with what demeans you. You no longer mistake chains for bonds. What feels like cruelty to them is simply freedom to you. And freedom is the one thing they never wanted you to taste. Because once you've had it, you'll never go back. So yes, your detachment is their nightmare. Not because they lost love, but because they lost the control they disguised as love. They're left scrambling, not knowing how to function without the power imbalance that kept them comfortable. Meanwhile, you've realized the truth. The bond was never your leash on them. It was always their leash on you. And by detaching, you didn't just break free, you broke the illusion entirely. Number 13, love doesn't die. Illusions do. Love doesn't die. Illusions do. That's the truth that makes heartbreak so confusing, because it often feels like something beautiful has been buried. But real love, the pure kind, doesn't vanish into thin air. It may shift, it may transform, it may no longer take the shape of a relationship, but it doesn't die. What actually collapses when things fall apart is the fantasy we built around the love, the story we convinced ourselves was unshakable. And when that illusion shatters, it feels like death. Heartbreak is rarely about the loss of what was. It's about the loss of what we thought it was. We grieve the imagined future, the roles we thought we'd play, the promises that were never kept but always believed. The collapse cuts so deep because it doesn't just take away the person, it takes away the dream attached to them. And when that dream dies, it feels like love itself has died. But love remains what it always was, an energy, an experience, a truth that existed in its moment. What dies is the projection we placed on it. That's why so many people struggle to move on. They're not just missing the person, they're detoxing from the illusion. They replay conversations, not because they want the truth, but because they're trying to resurrect the fantasy. They scroll through old pictures, not to remember reality, but to cling to the version of the story that made sense in their head. And the hardest part is accepting that the story was never as solid as we believed. It was built on hope, not fact, on potential, not proof, on illusion, not truth. But the death of illusion isn't a curse. It's a cleansing, because once the fantasy collapses, you finally get to see things as they are. You see the cracks you painted over. You see the red flags you turned into roses. You see the moments you called love that were really control or manipulation or desperation. And in that clarity, you realize that love didn't fail you. Illusion did. The beauty is that when illusions die, space opens up for real love to live. Not the kind that demands fantasy, but the kind that can stand naked in truth. So no, love doesn't die. It simply survives the collapse of the masks we wrapped it in. And heartbreak? That's not the death of love. That's the burial of the lie. Number 14. Your Idgaf mode isn't coldness. It's clarity. Your Idgaf mode isn't coldness. It's clarity. That's the turning point most people never expect from you, because they've been conditioned to mistake your kindness for weakness. For so long, you gave the benefit of the doubt. You made excuses. You carried burdens that weren't yours, and you called it love. You silenced yourself to keep peace. You shrank yourself to fit someone else's comfort, and you wore chains that were never meant for you. But the moment you realized that love isn't supposed to suffocate you, the moment you understood that true connection doesn't require you to disappear, something inside you shifted. You stopped apologizing for existing at your full size, and when that shift happens, people panic. Not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear. Clarity is threatening to those who benefited from your confusion. When you see that love is not supposed to mute your voice, those who relied on your silence feel attacked. When you see that love is not meant to cage your growth, those who preferred you small start calling you different or hard. They'll label your clarity as coldness, arrogance, even cruelty. Not because you've turned into something dark, but because you're no longer something they can manage. The truth is, clarity strips away illusions. It makes you immune to manipulation. It makes you uninterested in empty promises and unbothered by theatrics. And for people who fed off your need for approval, that indifference is unbearable. They don't miss your love. They miss your compliance. They don't crave your presence. They crave the version of you that bent to their will. Your Idgaf mode is the proof that you finally understand the difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. You know now that love should expand you, not erase you. It should make your world bigger, not smaller. And the moment you live in that truth, feathers will ruffle. Not because you've become unlovable, but because you've become uncontainable. So, no, you're not cold, you're clear, and that clarity is dangerous to anyone who only knew how to love you conditionally on their terms within their limits. Because now, you're not asking to be loved at half your size, you're demanding to be met as you are. And if they can't handle that, the loss is theirs, not yours. At the end of it all, love was never the enemy. The enemy was the illusions, the control, the masks, and the false definitions we were told to cling to. What we've uncovered here is simple but sharp. Love itself doesn't destroy you. People's egos, demands for worship, lack of capacity, and hunger for control do. Heartbreak doesn't mean love has failed. It means illusions have collapsed. And when you step into clarity, when your Idgaf mode activates, you finally see that your freedom was never coldness. It was always the truth shining through. The feathers ruffle because your strength unmasks what was fragile in them. Your detachment shakes those who thrived off your dependence. Your indifference dismantles their illusion of power. And your clarity? It forces everyone to realize that real love was never about shrinking you, silencing you, or chaining you down. It was about meeting you fully, standing with you, and growing beside you. So if people call you hard for choosing truth over fantasy, let them. If they say you've changed, accept it proudly. Because the you that finally knows love is not worship, not debt, not control, not illusion. That version of you is unstoppable, and that's the point. Love never died. You just stopped mistaking cages for connection. And now you're free to love at your full size with eyes wide open. And that's exactly what makes you untouchable. If this hit you deeper than the usual fluff out there, don't just scroll past. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it raw. And let me know in the comments where this truth landed with you. Because this channel isn't about sugarcoating, it's about clarity. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and stay free. Stay awakened. Chosen ones.